Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Nadorff, and I'm introducing my sleep, suicide, and aging lab. So, with this video, admittedly, this is going to be rather long. Our lab is rather complex with a lot of projects going on. So, I decided to create a shorter intro video if you're not looking to apply with me as your direct mentor. So, if you're not hoping to actually be primarily in my lab, please go ahead and check out the shorter video. If you are looking to be in my lab, then please stick around, and I apologize for the length, but as you'll see, there's just a lot that goes on in my lab, and we look very different than a lot of other labs out there. So I thought it was worth the time to try to explain what our lab looks like, what we look for, those sorts of things. Um, so first of all, in the background, this is George Hall. If you watch the video on the tour, you'll get to see the tour of our space, and that space is, if you look in this picture, the second floor, middle and right. That's kind of our area, just to orient you. Um, but what I hope to show you is who I am, at least on paper, which is probably what you already know from looking at my CV or looking at my website. But I think it doesn't really tell you much about me and about the work I do, and I think it's helpful to know the history. So I talked about my lab history, including my own history, as you'll see in developments with that, and an identity crisis and reorientation that really shaped where we are today, and then what makes us look a little different, as you'll see. And then we'll talk about where we're going, touch on lab alumni, and also on lab members. And then lastly, talk about who is and is not a good fit with us. Not every student's a good fit with us, and that's okay. Um, Even within our program, there are students that are going to be a good fit and not a good fit. But with that, there are also advisors that fill those gaps too. And ultimately, our goal is to find you the best fit, whether it's here or elsewhere. And I truly mean that with the or elsewhere. For anyone applying to me, the people that you applied to work with at other schools, honestly, I've been friends with for over a decade. I know them well, they know me well, and I can give you honest impressions on what it is you're looking, given what you're looking for, who would be a better fit for you. Because, you're talking a long time, at least 4 years in grad school. You're working very closely with someone. You want that to be a good match. You want it to be someone that um, that you work well with. So it's really important. So that's why I talk about who is and is not as good of a fit, because I want to help you make that choice. Yeah, while I'd love to recruit you no matter what, um, it's not worth recruiting you if you're not going to be happy here, or if you're not a great match. So I think it's worth going through that. So, these are kind of the academic stats that people look at, the things that we think, define us. So, PhD, got my PhD from West Virginia University in 2012. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And I actually started the same year at MSU. So, I did my internship at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, and then I came directly here after. And I actually became director of our clinical training program very early in my career. So in 2014, I took over the reins as DCT, and have been training director since then. And I'm an associate professor with tenure. Overall, I actually have 70 publications that are either in press or published, and I counted them up, and actually 31 of those are with a student author, or co-author rather. And I'm proud of that, because also a lot of those were from the time I was a trainee. So, there's less opportunities to publish with students, but, you know, I involve students with an awful lot of my research. I try to publish with students as much as I can. I've been cited over 1,900 times. Feels like a lot to me, but it's also a lot less than a lot of other people. But it is, I think, meaningful, because it shows that the work that we do is actually going out and being talked about and being implemented, and that's been increasing over time. We had over 500 citations last year, so I'm proud of that. It's fun to get to see, especially with sleep and suicide, it was such a small area when I started in this, and it's grown so much. So it's been fun to see that develop. And then as a primary investigator, I've had over $3 million in grant funding. So all this is good. All this is what you probably know about all the people you apply to work with. You probably don't know a lot of the backstory about why they do what they do. And for me, it's this. So this is Leona Marie Briola Roy. This is my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. And she died by suicide back in the 70s. And it actually was before I was born. And what, one would wonder, it's like, why would a suicide before you were born have such an impact that it leads you to do what you do? And for me, it was a family secret until I was in high school. And so I had no idea, I had been told she had died of cancer. And in high school, my dad let slip that it was a suicide. And it really blew my mind. And, just trying to get my head around how this happened in my family, what the implications were, um, what effect it had on people moving forward. And just got really interested in what brings someone to being so desperate, so miserable that they're suicidal. And so that really started my interest in suicide. I'll skip over my undergrad experience, though there are some fun experiences there that we could talk about. But really, as far as suicide, that's the reason I went to West Virginia. So there aren't a lot of suicide researchers out there. There are a lot more now than there used to be. Um, but one one that I really liked at the time, still do obviously, is Amy Fist. Dr. Amy Fist was my mentor at West Virginia if you're applying to work there. And so I went and started there in 2007. And my very first year, I was on a behavioral sleep medicine team. And I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Just the impact I kept seeing of these interventions on people's lives was really remarkable. And so I decided to start building that into my research. The other thing that happened at WVU is it just so happened WVU is a really strong gerontology program, and Amy is also a clinical gerontologist. So she didn't require that I did gero research, but it was one of those where when you walk into a place that's really known for something that has a strength, you got to take advantage of that. So I did some extra work to really, try to also get the gero specialization, and did some gero research and did try to add that to what I do. So with that, I have this research program that is sleep, suicide, and aging. And with it, I had always had this vision that what I was trying to do is eventually do a treatment study where I treated nightmares in order to show that treating nightmares reduces suicide risk. This had been my plan for years. I had written many grants to try to get funding to do it. And ultimately, what I really had realized is I was limited by what I could do here at MSU with that. There is a inpatient unit over in Columbus, about 20 miles away, but it's small. It's not equipped for research. Um, Recruiting suicide treatment samples was going to be really challenging here. And it was the time my daughter was born in 2014, so we were trying to decide where we were going to be long term. So we were on the job market, and I had actually gotten a job offer with a matching offer for my spouse in a psychiatry department. And I would have been able to do the treatment research they always had thought I was going to do. And so thought about it. Obviously, I chose to stay at MSU um, for a couple of reasons. I really enjoy doctoral training. I prefer this to intern training. You get to work with people longer, and you get to see them progress far more through their career. I think it's a more meaningful time to get to train someone. I really wanted to see our first students through an accredited program. Yeah, again, the PhD program at this point I just started. I was just recently the training director. I wanted to see them through and to see the program get accredited, which it did in 2016. And also, my in laws were interested in moving to Mississippi, which made a huge, huge difference. And so, one of the lessons I had learned earlier on, actually on my internship, is always try to do research where your circumstance is a strength and not a weakness. So I thought about that. I thought, what is research that's really well equipped for where I am in Mississippi? And I realized I needed to move upstream in the research I was doing. So let's talk a little bit about Mississippi because it's going to get important for understanding how we moved upstream. So, first, with Mississippi, we have the lowest number of psychologists per capita of any state. You can see we're about a third the national average. We have one psychologist for every 8,000 people. Um, that's remarkable. And I mean, that's health disparities right there. Even if you look at the South, where it's the lowest region, we're half the number of psychologists as per capita as the rest of the South. So a couple things hit me. So first, my own personal view is that being a psychologist in Mississippi, I feel like there's I at least personally feel a mandate that I need to be active in providing clinical services. I can't just be in the ivory tower. I need to actually be out there doing things because there are 8,000 plus people where I'm the only psychologist for them. Yeah, just by the numbers. So, so with that, I think it's important for us to do applied work and to try to um, take what we do and improve mental health in Mississippi. The other is you need to understand a little bit about the history of MSU. So we are a land grant university, and we really were created to serve the people of Mississippi, to make this a better place, and to translate the research and the cutting edge, and put it into practice here in the state. That's a big part of why we exist. And with that, the university is this is such a part of the identity. It's called the People's University, and so I really felt that I really align with that mission. And I feel like part of the mission at MSU should be giving back to our community and trying to be some of the leaders in mental health. Again, not just, being up here doing our own thing, doing our research, just publishing. We need to be leaders in the state, leaders in the region, helping, improve treatment, helping guide practice. Um, and so with that, I've really taken on a lot more of that identity of trying to be part of that solution, just realizing that we're in such a hole with this disparity and trying to work towards fixing that. And so that's brought along some interests in rural psychology and also blending that with implementation science. So if you're not familiar with that, it's essentially how do we take what we know works in the lab and make it work in the real world. So, for us, it's how do we take, for instance, suicide prevention strategies that we know work, that have empirical support, and how do we apply them in a place that has so few mental health professionals? How do we provide evidence-based treatment in a place where, so many towns are not going to have someone, a licensed provider? And also where honestly there's a lot of stigma about mental health and a lot of people, especially your farmers, are not going to be willing to go to see a psychologist or to see a mental health professional. We still got to get our interventions out there. We still need to help people. So how do we do that? So that's been a lot of the focus that I've had in recent years. And so as part of the shift, I started focusing on, okay, we need to start doing this outreach. We need to start increasing mental health resources for the people of Mississippi. And so we need to figure out a plan to do that, get funding to do it, start implementing it, and then do research, do program evaluation, see what works, do that implementation science. So I have been writing a lot of grants, and so as you can see, we've been fortunate since 2019 to get a good number of grants. Again, doing those upstream interventions that we talked about. So, um, in the statewide Garrett Lee Smith Youth Suicide Prevention Grant, we have a couple main activities that we do. We have we provide training on suicide prevention. It's a gatekeeper training that we developed. We also do trainings on how to do postvention, so how to respond after a youth suicide. And we also actually, as part of that, have a clinician who will go anywhere in the state and help lead a postvention effort after a suicide, which I think is really cool. I'm biased, but I think it's really cool. We also get to actually, in conjunction with the Department of Mental Health, lead a suicide prevention conference every year in September. So a lot of cool things we get to do with that grant. With Drug Free Communities, this is a grant that is just starting its second year now, and we're working on improving the drug prevention that happens in our schools in Tipaha County, which is our local county. Um, Pretty much all the schools are still using DARE, and there are a lot better programs out there. So we're working on trying to implement those programs and do program evaluation again. See if it's better. Um, Working on implementation steps with how do we actually get these into these under-resourced schools, especially during COVID. It's not the easiest thing to do. So that's been a really fun thing to do. We have a campus Garrett Lee Smith Suicide Prevention Grant. So that's doing suicide prevention work, but just on MSU's campus. So that's things like doing those gatekeeper trainings, but also doing mental health screenings and doing awareness activities and also actually providing clinical services. So a lot of different things fall under that. I have a small piece on a rural opioid technical assistance grant with Dr. Baez, who is part of MSU Extension. And with that, it's doing mental health related trainings. We have a couple grants that actually just came in as part of the CARES Act money in the last week or two, really recent. Um, One is PA'd by Dr. Robertson, who's also over at MSU Extension, doing more gatekeeper and mental health related trainings. So we're doing a lot of trainings. And we also have a youth telehealth grant that I'm super excited about that's going to allow us to hire two full time clinicians in our site clinic to provide uh, pro bono therapy for youth anywhere statewide. And we have partners both at MSU and its MSU Extension and also Department of Mental Health to help actually implement this telehealth statewide, help find people places to do telehealth for those that don't have internet at home, help overcome barriers that people run into. So we can hopefully establish this telehealth network to make it so, yeah, there aren't enough psychologists in Mississippi and we're not in enough places. But trying to link those rural communities to us so that they can get evidence based care. So I hope you can see from this how my change in worldview really has been leading to these grants and how these grants are fit with that and fit with where it is that I hope to go. So sleep, suicide, and aging is always going to be our sweet spot. And with that, I will always say, if you come to work with me, you don't have to do exactly what I do. And if you look at my students, they don't. I just need to be competent in whatever research you do. So I need to be close enough that I can competently mentor you. But I want people to do the research that they're passionate about. And as long as it's something that falls under my umbrella, we can work with it. So often that ends up being sleep, suicide, or aging. Again, doesn't have to be more than one. Just it's something often in there. But um, with some of these new grants, we have so many opportunities where if you're interested in rural mental health, telehealth or technology-aided therapy, substance use and prevention, uh, suicide or mental health awareness trainings. We have tremendous opportunities. So, for instance, with the trainings, we're training 5,000 people a year on these gatekeeper trainings. We're collecting a lot of data as part of that. You know, there are so many opportunities with these data, and we just need to exploit it. But there are a lot of opportunities that are really cool with grants, especially with the grants the size we have. So we're very fortunate, and I'm really looking forward to try to find more and more projects. They're tied to our program evaluation where we can help take that to the next level. Um, Here are my lab alums. So Shay Golding was actually my first PhD, and she is at Spectrum Health Sleep Center up in Michigan. She's a clinical psychologist there, but she just does behavioral sleep medicine. Um, Chris Drapeau, I can't fully take credit for because he was a postdoc, so he got his PhD at Ball State, but he came and worked with me for a year, specializing in suicide. He was a assistant professor at Valparaiso. His position unfortunately was discontinued due to COVID, but he is now the Indiana State Suicide Prevention Director. And lastly, Kat Speed is a staff psychologist at the Augusta VA. So you can see that, our alums are outgoing, doing good things. They're, still involved with research and certainly are involved with the topics that we focus on in the lab. So that does my heart good. So as far as talking about our current lab members, we're a really funny looking lab, and that's part of why I knew this video would be so long because, we have our grad students, but we actually have a lot more people. So we have Courtney Bolstad, and as I mentioned, just because you're in my lab doesn't mean you need to do the work that I do. So she's interested in behavioral sleep medicine and aging, but also really her passion is human-animal interaction. So I've been trying to catch up on that. But that's the research she does. Ashley Pate does suicide in individuals who identify as sexual or gender minorities. And then Anisha Thomas is a secondary lab member. Her primary professor is Dr. Berman, and she does suicide and culture and acculturation research. As far as the rest of my lab, we have a lot. Again, we have a lot of staff because we have a lot of different projects going on. So Tanya Combs is our business coordinator. So she helps me both with the PhD program. So you'll probably get emails from her, but also she helps with managing all the business side and all the budgets for all of our projects. Rachel Claire Franklin is with that state Garrett Lee Smith grant where she does a lot of those trainings we talked about, and she is the clinician that will go out and respond if there's a suicide and help with leading the postvention anywhere in the state. Courtney Swan is a social worker who's a project coordinator for that Drug-Free Communities grant. So she's leading that project. Melanie Walsh is someone who we're hiring now. Dr. Walsh is a LPC, so she's a licensed professional counselor and has her PhD in counselor education. And she is part of that telehealth grant that we talked about that just got funded. So she helped us write that and will be funded off of that. And we're actually hiring one or two more full-time staff members who will be joining the roster. I say one or two because there are two more that we're hiring. It's just one of them may or may not end up being housed with us. So you may or may not see two people, but you'll definitely see at least one more staff person coming on. So with this, again, it's a unique experience, but it also presents unique opportunities because how many labs have, a good number of staff and truly a multidisciplinary team that you can take advantage of and you can get assistance with the research you're doing, especially if it's one of these projects that we talked about. So it's a neat opportunity. So I wanted you to be aware of those individuals and and the work that they do. So, pros and cons of working with me. So, this is the harder part to talk about because while I like to think it's all pros, and there's certainly many pros, again, I'm not the right person for everyone. So, it's worth talking through the pros and cons, the benefits and costs. So, um, if you can't tell, I have a few pots in the fire. I enjoy building things. I enjoy getting the grants, making the world a better place. So with that, I'm constantly bouncing from place to place and constantly, in meetings. And um, so it's just something to be aware of, and with that, I do pride myself in making sure I make time for my lab and my students. So we'll always meet weekly as a lab, and you'll always have a weekly meeting with me. So those are non-negotiables. Um, what is negotiable is it won't always be the same time each week. I'm involved with enough things where often, like if I have a meeting with the president or the provost, which does happen sometimes, um, I'm not asked what my availability is. I'm told when I'm meeting with them. So, so those meetings happen where sometimes the time is dictated to me, and I have to change things around. So I mentioned just because I do need some grace there, and it's not that I don't respect your time. I do. It's just that with the roles I have, that does happen. So on the flip side, one of the things I'm really good at is I'm really good at making connections and making opportunities for my students, and I think you can get a sense of that through some of the projects we have and some of the connections we already have. But it's also worth asking them when you interview with my lab about some of those connections and what opportunities they have had as part of working with me. One that I insist on that I think is really important is for anyone where I'm the major professor, I ask that on your dissertation you have at least one outside person from outside the university. And, well, it doesn't have to be outside the university, at least outside, the program. It's not required by the PhD program, but I just think it's really important. And what we try to do is we try to look at whatever it is your area is and figure out who is the top person in that area. And we try to get them on the committee. It ends up being a really nice networking opportunity, and they get to know your work, and you get to know them in a much deeper way. So it's been a really good thing for us, in my opinion. So, who fits well with us and who doesn't fit well? So, let's start with some of the who doesn't fit well. And none of this is meant as judgment because you can be very successful graduate students and fall into these categories, and it's just that there are mentors that are really good at these, and I'm not as much. So I'm working on being better with them. Um, Ironically, for the three that you see here with um, students that do not fit as well with me, actually, Dr. Danielle Nadorff, my wife, is great with these, especially the affirmation and reassurance. She's tremendous. So, if you're looking at this and you think, well, I really do need that type of mentorship, actually, maybe look at her. You might find that she's a really good fit for you. But anyway, going through them, um, I'm not a great fit for those that need a lot of hand holding or shown each step on a project. I'm happy to meet with students. I'm happy to point you in the right direction, give you resources. Yeah, but I need students who can, as the first bullet of the second part says, can take the guidance and run with it, and go figure out the next 3 or 4 steps, and then come back and we'll figure out where to go from there, instead of needing to be walked through each step along the way. I don't do great with students who need help with time management, where they're needing me to say, "Hey, I haven't seen your dissertation draft in a while. Where is it?" Or students that sink into the background and where they're out of sight, out of mind. Because I'm running in so many different directions, it's easy for it to fall off my plate as well. So kind of flipping back down to students who do well with me. I do great with students who are assertive and will ask for help when they need it. Again, I'm happy to help. I truly am. Um, but I often won't know if you're struggling until you tell me. So I do well when I have students who tell me and are also flexible enough to be able to take advantages of the resources that I have in the lab. Um, that's not a requirement, but it's something that's always a bonus. And then students that need a lot of affirmation or reassurance, this is just a working style thing that I've been working on. So I'm hopefully getting better at it. But the way I work, I'm one where I get something done. I maybe dwell on it for 5 minutes and then I move on to the next thing. Again, as you can probably tell from the way I work in my CV. Um, I don't do great with providing a lot of affirmation and reassurance. It's just not the way I work or my style. I'm working on doing better with that, but it's not a strength. And so if you're one that really needs a lot of that and needs the recognition as you go along, then again, someone like my wife, Dr. Danielle Nadorff, is a really good fit, and I can help you with other really good fits either in sleep or in suicide or aging. But just in general, I know that's not my strength. Um, so looking back down on where I'm strong, if you're passionate about research, if you're flexible enough to take advantage of our resources, and again, the last thing's not required, but it's a nice to have. If you share a passion for building something and improving mental health care in Mississippi, you're going to do well here. You're going to do well with us. I think we're building something special. We have a really special team. And if you like that, if you like the fact that we're constantly developing and taking on new things, but also having new opportunities and experiences um, and all those sorts of things, I think we're a great fit. So hopefully that speaks to you. Hopefully I didn't scare you off. I don't mean to. I just again it's so important. It's 4 years. It's a really important relationship. I want to make sure it's the right fit for you. So I hope that gives you a better sense of who works well with me and who doesn't and what we do. Thank you for sticking with me for over a half hour. I apologize it's been so long. And if you're still interested, then please request an interview with me and with the lab and let us get to know you more and let's see if it's a good fit. So thank you again, and I hope you have a great interview.